to start with the Christian rock thing. Now, I know this was kind of, especially on our Facebook group, this was kind of a big deal for a little bit, as we had some people on there that were not happy when this article came out, and I knew this was not going to make people happy. Now, I am a person, before I even begin on this, I got to tell you, I'm a person that was into a lot of Christian rock back before I was saved. In fact, after I was saved, I got back into it again. I went away from it as I went off to college. I moved away from the Christian rock stuff. I was into it a lot when I was in high school because we were attending this big Nazarene church back in the day. That all that stuff was encouraged for their youth groups and all that. And a lot of churches they encourage a lot of this Christian rock stuff, which I'm going to show is mostly unbiblical in a lot of aspects. So I was into that, and then went to college. I got away from it, and then got back into it again after I got saved, and I dropped it pretty soon after. Now, the kind of people that you're going to see, they get all emotional about their Christian rock music and things like that. I used to be one of them. Okay, I used to be one of these people. So I'm not speaking from someone who was never involved in any of this stuff. I'm speaking from someone who was involved in this stuff, and I'm telling you, it is all emotional based. It's not really biblically based. And a lot of people that have come on and made tons of railing accusations against me on our Facebook group, as you guys that follow our Facebook group have known that they did, when they're doing that, they're really doing it out of their own emotional attachment to what I would call their pet lusts. They lust after this music for all sorts of reasons we could give. I mean, there's a lot of emotional things about it, but it's one of the things that they enjoy. And the problem is that someone who was into rock music and then they start attending a church, they say the sinner's prayer, and it's typically a false convert, somebody that gets into it. They say the sinner's prayer and they think they're saved and they're really not. And then they look for any excuses to remain in their sin, not have to change anything in their lives, but still go to heaven because they don't like the concept of hell. That's really what it comes down to. It's not that they are truly repentant and that they seek to have the salvation of God to please and glorify God in what they're doing. It's not really about that. A true repentant sinner is going to be more focused on that. Really, it's this, I just want to avoid hell. I really just want to go to heaven. And a lot of them don't even believe in hell anymore. I mean, that's really a concept that's being thrown out the window. Yes, we want to be saved from the wrath to come, but we do that after we acknowledge that we are guilty of God's law, and that we, as a result of our salvation, want to be more righteous for the glory of God. So in the Christian rock, what happens is that they're all into this rock music, which is totally of the devil, as we're going to find out here. And they want to keep a hold of that style of music. They like that music, okay? And the rock music, Satan has chosen his style of music. And the rock and the metal and the punk and all this kind of stuff that you're listening to is the style of music he has chosen to deliver his messages, obviously. And like I said, we're going to find that coming up here because we're going to be discussing this for probably at least the next 3 weeks. But just step by step, we'll be going over it. And for those of you who want to follow along, if you guys are listening to a recording, anybody who's downloaded this MP3 or listening to this recording, you can go onto our website, just type in the word rock or Christian rock into the search engine, and that'll bring up an article that's called What's Wrong with Christian Rock, and you can follow along step by step as we go through this. Now, the first verse I want to give here of what a lot of people are using to excuse away. Oh, excuse me, I didn't finish my thought. Sorry, I get off on tangents like that and I forget to finish my thought. The point is that when they have this lust after their rock music, then once they think, they think they're saved, and, well, now I got to do things more Christian, so they want an excuse to keep their sin, so basically they go into Christian rock, which is not any better, and I will make the argument by the time we're done with this that the satanic rock music that's just flat out talking about hell and Satan and all this stuff is not near as dangerous as Christian rock. And we'll show exactly why, and we'll give some verses to back that up as well. So one of the verses I hear most often quoted for people that are going to defend their obsession with Christian rock is Ephesians 5:19. It says, "Speaking to yourselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord." Okay, now this one is completely overused, and it's used in justification of some things that are extremely wicked, that it shouldn't be used for justification for. And when it says speak to yourselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, Do you think we have an example in the book of Psalms of what psalms and hymns and spiritual songs should be? Well, obviously. The book of Psalms should be a leading example of the kind of things you should find in a truly Christian song that is truly worshiping God and giving God glory. And we're going to find that when we compare this to a lot of the modern, especially, I'm not just talking modern Christian rock, even modern contemporary music, has left out a lot of the gospel, unless, of course, they're trying to... most of the ones that don't are ones, they'll have some singer that they want to make this bold, grandiose display of their voice, and then they do this really slow, emotional rendition of an old hymn. But even then, a lot of times, really what they're doing, they're glorifying themselves. They're just showing off their voices. They're not really giving glory to God. Because you have all these people that... I just have to make mention of this. I see this. I've seen this so many times. Whether it was on... I used to be a care aide in elderly's homes and stuff like that. And one of them would have on, a Christian television station. And I remember seeing it there and seeing it in different churches I've been to and different places I've been. You see these people, and this lady will be up on stage, and she's singing, and she hits this really high note, and then everybody raises their hands. They're not really glorifying God as much as they're giving glory to this woman for her voice. I've seen it happen so many times. And we'll talk more about that later as we get to it, but it was just crossing my mind. I want to make mention of that. I see this kind of standard thing going on in churches, and it's really more self-worship than anything else. So we see this in Ephesians 5:19, but I also want to make mention of a few verses before it mentions this. It's very important in Ephesians chapter 5. This is verses 15 through 17. Listen to this. It says, "See then that ye walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise. Wherefore be ye not unwise, but understanding what the will of the Lord is." And then it goes on to talk about speaking to yourselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. So the first thing we should do, before even going to singing songs and all that kind of thing, we should find out what the will of the Lord is. If we don't know what the will of the Lord is, then we could call something a psalm, a hymn, or a spiritual song, but it's really not, because we don't understand the will of the Lord. Remember Jesus Christ, when he was talking about in Matthew chapter 7, about there will be many that will come unto me and say, "Lord, Lord, didn't I prophesy in their name and do all these wonderful works in thy name?" He'll say, "Depart from me, ye that work iniquity." And what he said, and there's correlating verses of that where he says, he looks to he that doeth the will of my Father. So to know the will of God is extremely important. We have to study the Word of God to know that. So again, I have so many Christians I've just talked to or listened to. They've said, "Well, I felt like the Holy Spirit was telling me this," just like I talked about earlier. But I'm saying, here's what God's Word said about it. So it doesn't matter how you felt. Well, the Holy Spirit was speaking to me through this song because I felt it. Well, is your foundation on how you feel, or is your foundation the Word of God? And we have to make sure we understand that the words that are coming out of people's mouth is very important. Because again, there's a lot we can take on confession, because the Bible says that even that a man can be is condemned through what he confesses out of his mouth. The Bible teaches us that. So we need to be careful about, even when a singer gets up and sings a song, you're not just singing, for entertainment. The words that are coming out of your mouth are confession. When you're speaking those, again, we have to be very careful about what we say. But let's continue here. Romans chapter 7, verse 7. It says, "What shall we say then? Is the law sin? God forbid. Nay, I had not known sin but by the law. For I had not known lust, except the law had said, Thou shalt not covet." So we can't know what's good or bad in music unless we know the Word of God first. Then 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 3, it says, "For this is the will of God, even your sanctification, that ye should abstain from fornication." That's an example of that. So the will of God is known by studying God's Word. So you study His law, you study His Word, you know what He approves of and what He doesn't approve of. The will of God is not founded on what we feel to be God's will. It's based on what His Word tells us. And many people walk around, they're calling themselves Christians, and they believe they can do whatever they please, and God still loves them. Again, we're not saved by our works, but our works are a direct evidential result of salvation. So the music we listen to can not only alter our minds for better or worse, but it can also set an example to the world of what is acceptable to God? Well, again, you see, setting an example to the world of what is acceptable to God, that's why we should be cleaning our lives out to the best extent that we can. I mean, I understand in this day and age it's very difficult to abstain from everything because there's so much, I mean, everywhere you turn, there's sin everywhere. And it's very, especially with the modern information age that we're in, the digital age that we're in, it's very difficult to get away from things because it's all over the place. But, take this for example. I've had women before I've talked to, they're so desperate to find some purpose. Well, I feel like I have no purpose in God and blah, blah, blah. And they're always out trying to find their purpose. Like they have to have some, and a lot of times they'll start making up things in their life. They'll say, oh, well, God called me to do this one thing over here. And they start, oftentimes they're saying it without, God didn't actually call them to do that. God didn't tell them anything. They just felt that way because they're so desperately seeking some sort of purpose. It is possible for God to have no purpose for us whatsoever. I mean, there are some people that are saved right before they die. They didn't really have any purpose. They did more harm than good, really. So we have to sometimes let God's grace, the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, be sufficient in our lives. To be content with what we have and not seeking some grandiose purpose. Just do what we're commanded to do. That's all. But a lot of women, what they don't understand, like take for the ones that are actually doing what the Bible says and giving reverence to her husband. Like even if he might be making some decisions that, he thinks that's what's best for the family, she might not, that kind of thing, but she follows her husband in what he's doing. She gives reverence unto him. And what they don't understand is that example right there. Because you remember, the Bible continually, Jesus Christ, over and over, referenced his relationship to the church as a marriage and gave parables in marriage between us, the church, and him, Jesus Christ. So what a woman needs to understand is just by following the laws of God and the commandments of God and how she is supposed to be towards her husband in a marriage, she is giving an example to other Christians and to the world on how the church is supposed to act in reverence towards Jesus Christ. Whoa! Now that's something that a lot of women don't stop to think about. They think, oh, well, I don't have much purpose. I just, I wish God had some grand thing for me. The grandest thing is just to do what he's commanded a wife to do. Because in that, it shows an example of how the church is supposed to act towards Jesus Christ. And it's a grand testimony against the modern New Age church that are not acting in reverence towards Jesus Christ. They're really departing from him, and they're starting to participate in fornication by bringing all these things like Christian rock into the church. They're bringing all the rock music and everything, all these other pagan things like the fantasy novels and all that stuff we're going to cover later in different weeks down the road. But all that stuff is, just her being in proper reverence to her husband is testimony against that stuff. As a testimony for what the church is supposed to be doing. Likewise, the husbands, how you treat your wives is going to be an example to the world on how Jesus Christ is supposed to treat the church. So we have to be careful how we're treating our spouses in that manner. Anyway, continuing. So many Christian churches today are teaching the next generation by their own example to equate the Holy Spirit with how they feel. And since music can alter how one feels, when someone gets a good feeling from the music they are hearing, they then in error turn around and automatically equate that to the Holy Spirit moving through them. Do you see how dangerous this is? It's extremely dangerous to label the whimsical feelings of our hearts as the Holy Spirit. We're not supposed to do that. Whatever happens, if something in your heart, if you say you're getting a feeling from the Holy Spirit, well, that feeling is not matching up with what God's Word tells us, then that is not the Holy Spirit. Because there's nothing the Holy Spirit will do that will go against the Word of God. So we'll get into some examples of Christian rock later, and it may not even be this week that we'll get to them. It depends on how long this goes. But we first need to determine what rock music is, where it comes from, and understand what tree this has produced and what fruit it is producing. Okay? Because remember, we can't get good fruit out of an evil tree. It's not possible. The Bible says that's not possible. So whatever we think, if there's something that's evil that we might think is good, we need to seriously examine ourselves and seriously pray for discernment so we can understand what the truth of that matter is. Because rock is actually short for rock and roll, the term rock and roll, which everybody's familiar with, but it's a term that was originally developed to refer to sex. Okay, now this is from a book called Rock and Roll: An Introduction, and it says, quote, "Rockin' and rollin' was originally a euphemism for the sexual act. The expression had been in use on recordings for almost 30 years by the time disc jockey Alan Freed attached rock and roll to a musical style," end quote. Here's another one from a book called History of Rock and Roll. It says, quote, "When Alan Freed moved to WINS in 1954, he was forced to change the name of his show from the Moondog House Rock and Roll Party to the Rock and Roll Show. Although Alan Freed did not coin the term rock and roll, it was a black euphemism for sexual intercourse that had been around for at least 30 years. He undoubtedly helped connect the label to the music for an ever-widening audience," end quote. So, as our American society is becoming more corrupt in the 20th century here, I mean, there has been, just over the past 100 years, a huge increase in sexual promiscuity. I'm not saying that it's only existed in the past 100 years, okay? Because obviously that kind of stuff has been going on for thousands of years. But in America, in the past 100 years, it has increased, I mean, thousands of percent from what it used to be back in the 1800s. There used to be a very strict it was a social no-no, and at this point it's becoming common. I mean, you've got, I one time, I'm trying to think of the name of the show. This was many years ago. Have you guys heard of a show called Kyle XY?
I feel like is that a show about it's kind of sci-fi, right?
I think so, but I only watched like half of the first episode and I turned it off. Because if this is, okay, this was a show, I remember it was shown on ABC Family. And that is, ABC Family cracks me up. I can't even hardly say the name with a straight face. Family nothing, okay? When Kyle XY was if you ever see it, I'm not encouraging anybody to watch that because a lot of it, I can't even go into all the aspects of it that are really, the concept of itself is really demonic. But when it opens, very first episode, the pilot episode opens, it's got, because there's a family, there's the mother and father, there's an older daughter and her younger brother. The younger brother is, he's in his room masturbating to like Playboy magazine or something like that. This is ABC Family, okay? This is good, wholesome fun for the family, right? And then the daughter is trying not to get caught because she's having sex with her boyfriend in their house. So this is ABC Family, all right? That is, you can see by the television that people are watching, the television shows are, I'm not encouraging people to watch TV at all, but the television shows are really a good indicator of where we are in our country right now. And that, I mean, that was on, I don't remember how long ago that aired. That show was on, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or something. It's gotten worse. ABC Family shows just totally perverted stuff all the time. And it's supposed to be for a family-oriented, I mean, how do you sit as a Christian and watch something like that and then try to explain that opening scene to your children? I mean, supposedly you're going to have like 5, 6, and 7-year-olds watching this. That is not what I want my children watching. Anyway, continuing on there, I kind of want to drill that into the ground just a little bit more, but I think I'm going to continue here because I could talk about that all day. That really, it irks me that so many Christians are just being totally oblivious to this kind of thing, and they watch TV all the time. And I sit back and I think, you know what? I calculated out one time with Lorraine. I said, if 50 Christian homes, I think it was like 50, if I remember right, or something like that. I can't remember if it was 50 or 100. Let's say it's 100. Let's say 100 Christian homes. Do you think in Indiana there's 100 families that say, oh yeah, we're Christian, we go to church, we're faithful, but they have cable TV? I mean, you would think, obviously, yeah, there's going to be somebody. There's going to be at least 100, probably a lot more than that. But if 100 of them would say, you know what, we're gonna turn off our cable TV for 1 month, and we're gonna send that $50 over to Creation Liberty Evangelism. You realize I could work full time in this ministry without having to have a job? I mean, when I think about that, and I see all the corruption that people are bringing to their homes and putting on to their TV screens, I'm just like, where are we in America? How can we even call ourselves Christian in America? I mean, we haven't been, I mean, we were a nation of Christians. We've never been a Christian nation. There was a nation of Christians because there was an awful lot of Christians in this nation at one point, but there is not anymore. I mean, and then that statistic I read, a few weeks ago when I talked about how the recent polls were saying that 75% of the American population claims to be Christian. That's such a joke. You have to laugh or you're going to cry. I mean, that can't be the case. That's absolutely impossible with what we're reading in the Word of God. Anyway, continuing on, I'll quit talking about that. But continuing on, what they would do, basically, the teenagers, were getting to a point where they want to go out and have sex, but it's socially unacceptable. Their parents are saying no. They don't want anybody to find out that they're doing it. Okay, anymore, a lot of them are having sex, and they don't really care who finds out. I mean, it's getting that bad, and it's going to get worse. Well, gosh, I don't even want to talk about it. There's some stuff I shouldn't even talk about in here. Some of the modern things that teenagers are doing now on the sexual thing is just unbelievable. And maybe if I get into talking about that, it might come up later. I don't know. We'll see. But I really don't want to talk about it because some of it I don't even think is appropriate to talk about on a recording like this. Anyway, they want to have sex, but they got to do it somewhere. All right, and so they want to do it in private. Well, you can't really go and just get a hotel room, especially back in the 40s and 50s like that. I mean, that's going to look really suspicious in the town and all that. And so basically the best place they could go for privacy was in their cars. So they would go and they would fornicate in their cars. And basically you'd have them having sex in the car would rock the car back and forth. And then when they were done, they would roll away, drive away. So it's called rock and roll. That's where the term comes from. And so, think about that. The term rock is short for rock and roll, which is basically that it's sex. So when someone says rock music, they're actually saying sex music. So when someone says Christian rock music, what are they actually saying? I mean, this is not rocket science, okay? It's not hard to figure out where this is coming from. You can't even call something Christian sex music because that's an oxymoronic phrase. That doesn't even make sense. You can't have those two words built up, or all three of those words built up in the same sentence there, because it doesn't make sense. So the rock music genre has evolved into many other forms. You got punk rock, you got alternative rock, you got heavy metal, you got goth rock, you got grunge. There's so many of them out there. I mean, so many, and there are subgenres of these coming on all the time. Every other year there's a new one coming out, and somebody, or probably annually now, you got new ones coming out all over the place because everybody wants to claim their position over the rock genre, And I used to be one of those people. When I listened to rock music, I used to be one of those people that rolled my eyes at the older folks that would call rock music, they'll say, "That's the devil's music," and I would roll my eyes at those people. And then the young folks just roll their eyes and are like, "You just don't understand, you just don't like it, but you just don't understand." And so what I've discovered was that as I was researching this article is that both generations are actually correct. The older folks did not understand the truth behind rock music. They were just calling it the devil's music for a lot of reasons. They would hear a rock song that would talk about the devil in it, and so they call it the devil's music. And also would just, they just didn't like it, so they wouldn't, they call it the devil's music and that kind of thing. And then you have the younger folks that are listening to the devil's music. So technically both sides were correct, but both sides are ignorant onto why they were both correct. So we need to get both sides here to understand the proper education on the origins of rock music, okay? So we first need to take a look at a guy by the name of Aleister Crowley. Now Crowley is someone who, by many people, is considered to be the most wicked man to have ever walked the face of the earth in the past 200 years. And somebody will say, "Wait a second, do you say he's worse than Hitler?" Oh yeah. This guy is one of the most wicked men and satanic men I have ever even heard of all throughout history. Maybe there were people worse in the past, I don't know, but this guy was pretty bad. So the following author I'm going to quote here it comes from a book called Understanding Aleister Crowley's Throth Tarot, as in tarot cards, because he had a whole brand of tarot magic that he worked. It said, quote, I referred to my occult dictionary and discovered to my horror Aleister Crowley, famous Scottish Satanist, end quote. So Aleister Crowley he worshipped Satan on all sorts of levels. He was really high into witchcraft, he worshipped Satan, and he was also part of something called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. This is from a book called Satanism Today. Said, quote, Samuel Mathers, a founder of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, had significant but indirect influence on modern religious Satanism through Aleister Crowley, a one-time member of the order, end quote. Now, I don't get into too many details here about what happened to Aleister Crowley after he got out of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, because he joined it, he was in it for a short time, and then he left. He didn't leave because, oh, wow, this is a really bad organization, I should get out of that. No. He was having fights with the current leader, the Samuel Mathers. He was having fights with him, and there was internal conflict, because Aleister Crowley wanted to get into the deep, wicked, really, really dark black magic. He wanted to get into some of the really heavy stuff. And the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, though they were into some of that stuff, they were not into it as heavily as Aleister Crowley was. So there was a power struggle. And after that, Aleister Crowley left and formed his own cult. It was another order that he formed. I actually forget what the name of it is right off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up again. But that order that he created, and if you ever find out the name of what it is, this is something that I am urging, even if witches that are not, I understand that witches do not want to hear a word I have to say about the Bible. They hate the Bible, they hate all that stuff. But I'm telling you that I'm urging witches, do not get involved in Aleister Crowley's old order, because it still exists today and there are people involved in it. It is so wicked. You want nothing to do with it. I don't want to talk about, I just don't think it's appropriate to talk about some of the stuff they do. But you need to understand that the kind of magic that is involved in that order, they do things like, when they do their initiations, they have what they call sex magic. They do sex yoga. They also do things where you have to eat your own feces and drink your own urine. There's stuff like that they do in this. And I don't want to talk about it to any great degree, because the Bible says, we're not supposed to be deceived by the devices of Satan. We're supposed to understand his devices, but it also says be simple concerning evil. So I don't want to get into a whole lot of detail about what they do, because it doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is it's evil. And this stuff is like the highest of the most wicked Satanism that people can get involved in, is what Aleister Crowley developed. But from this book it says, The Wiser, Concise Guide to Aleister Crowley. That's what this book's called. It says, quote, Crowley contributed several articles to the English Review under various pseudonyms. Two of these, The Great Drug Delusion and The Drug Panic, described Crowley's attitudes on drug legalization and his emerging theory of addiction. Crowley had experimented with the magical use of drugs, most of which he acquired legally from his chemist, end quote. Now, one thing you need to understand in the Bible is when it talks about, and I think I mentioned this in weeks past, I guess you guys have to remind me if I did mention it. When the Bible talks about sorcery, and where we get the root word for pharmaceuticals or drugs, the root word for pharmaceuticals, pharmakia, means it comes from the word sorcery. So when the Bible talks about sorcery, you need to understand that people taking drugs and getting high like that is part of sorcery. You are doing sorcery when you take those drugs. So when people say, oh, I don't know why marijuana is bad for me, well, because the Bible doesn't talk about it. Yeah, it does. It's sorcery. And you'll find that many, the green witches or the eco witches. In fact, this week I talked about in the Facebook group today, I met this week a witch that was working at a Walmart. I was doing a job out there, and I met her, and I decided to start talking to her about it, and she's into all this stuff, and she was actually helping me verify that through her practices and study of witchcraft, everything that I've written on so far, even with like the marriage stuff, the witchcraft involved in that, she was verifying for me that, yeah, that stuff are witchcraft rituals. Because she's one of these green witches. She's all into the herbs and the different combinations of flowers and herbs and fragrances and colors and things like that, how they would make the bridal bouquet comes from that. She verified that, yeah, that's all true. And so I'm just saying, this is coming from practicing witches. So it's not like you have to take my word for it. I'm saying that they themselves will verify it for you. I mean, anytime you guys can witness to witches, and it's very easy to find them. Most often, you just have to look for one of those pentagrams on. They'll usually have like a necklace they wear that's got a pentagram on it, something like that. If you find a pentagram, which is the 5-pointed star, if you find it with the star pointing up, that's white magic, white witchcraft. If you find it pointing down, that's black witchcraft. So that can be a conversation starter when you just start asking them about it. Say, oh yeah, how did you get, are you into paganism? Yeah, and if you say the word paganism, that basically means witchcraft. Today, how they use, paganism did not always mean that. Paganism is usually typically of people who worship a pantheon of gods, even though that's what they do in witchcraft. But anymore today, when you say paganism, it usually means, witchcraft or Wicca or something like that. So you can ask them, oh, how did you get involved in paganism? What led you to that? And I asked her that. I said, what led you to get involved in witchcraft? And she said there were some movies that she saw. One of them being a movie called The Craft. I went and looked up a movie trailer for it. I'd never seen it. It was a bunch of girls that got into witchcraft. And it was this movie about how they were having fun casting all these spells and doing all these things and how real it was to them. That's how she got involved in it. And we're going to find out later that even these occult fantasy novels and things like that, that's how a lot of witches get started in their witchcraft, and we'll talk about that once we get to that subject. But including in this, like the green witches and the eco witches like this, a lot of them will go out into the forest. They want to commune with nature. They want to use their witchcraft to communicate with the trees. And part of the way they do that is through cannabis and mushrooms. They go get high. They go out in the woods, and a lot of them, there's some of them that like to go around. They're nudists. They get high, they take off all their clothes, run around the forest, and they have visions of different animals talking to them and the trees talking to them and things like that. There's something in the drugs that is part of sorcery that really does make people start communing with the spirit world more. It opens up those channels, and that's why people should never get involved in drugs at all because it can really ruin your mind. In more ways than one, once you start taking drugs, you invite demonic spirits into you to start possessing you. And along with the physical addictions that you get from it, plus the demonic possession, you can get so far into drugs that you can't come back. I mean, the Bible does talk about that God just gives up on some people. There's some people that they get so far into their sin and their wickedness, there's no turning back for them after a certain point. Not because they can't be saved, it's that they won't be. They refuse it. I mean, their hearts are just too turned off to the gospel. So I would hate that anybody out there that's listening to this, that He would just give up on you. I hope that hasn't happened for anybody yet, but get off the drugs. Whatever you got to do, go to a friend's house. Say, I don't care if you have to tie me to a bed and feed me and change a bedpan or whatever. Just keep me here for 3 or 4 weeks so I can get off my drugs. Whatever you got to do, get off of it. Just get as far away from it as you can. And make sure you have people pray over you, get saved, get baptized, get those demons out of you. Anyway, continuing. Anytime that you hear of a religious cult called Thelema, or Thelemites, or something like that, that was they're part of high-level satanic occultists, the Aleister Crowley. That's what they call the Thelemites, are what they call his religious cult. And this is a quote from, again, the Wiser, Concise Guide to Aleister Crowley. It says, quote, the Greek word thelema, for thelema, or will, is what that says. The will, W-I-L-L, will as in my own will. He continues, it says, or will refers to the legitimate expression of a person's human and divine natures. It may be compared to one's purpose, function, calling it destiny, mission, or similar concept. In accordance with the principle, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, And that's Aleister Crowley's quote. That was his summation of his entire religious belief. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. And all of it, every time Satan is tempting people, he's always tempting people about having their own will over things. And that is, it's pride. We as Christians are supposed to desire the will of God above all things. And the quote continues, it says, Thelemites devote themselves entirely to the discovery and fulfillment of their true wills. Note, the value of thelema in the Greek alphabet is 93. This led Crowley to abbreviate the phrase, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, as 93, and Thelemites often greet each other with 93, end quote. So they actually use that number to greet one another. And Aleister Crowley, he wrote a book called Magic. This is what he said, quote, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. There is no law beyond do what thou wilt, end quote. So the Bible, on the other hand, tells us in Romans chapter 12, and be ye not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. And 1 John chapter 2, verse 17, and the world passeth away, and the lust thereof, but he that doeth the will of God abideth forever. So Aleister Crowley's teaching people, do the exact opposite of what the Bible says. Just seek to do whatever you want. And the devil also wanted to do that. You know, Aleister Crowley's teaching people to say, I will do this, I will do this, I will do this. Okay, well, Isaiah chapter 14, we covered this before. In verses 12 through 15, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which dost weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thy heart, I will ascend unto heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. And remember, we covered that in Psalm, talked about the sides of the north being the place where God is supposed to sit, and does sit. And he continues, it says, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. So doing whatever you will in your own mind is really fulfilling the lust of the heart. Whatever my heart wants, let's just do that. And we can't trust in our hearts. Remember Jeremiah 17? It says the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Well, how can we trust in our hearts? How can we trust in our own will? We can't do that, but that's what Aleister Crowley was doing. And just bear with me here. This does apply to the Christian rock thing, but we have to cover this stuff about Aleister Crowley first. And it says, or here, this quote, this is from Aleister Crowley again, in his book Magic. He said, quote, one would go mad if one took the Bible seriously, but to take it seriously, one must be already mad, end quote. So he thought you take the Bible seriously, you're crazy. And everything that he did was exactly opposite of what the Bible was teaching. This guy was incredibly wicked. And he desired human sacrifice. Crowley did sacrifice people. He did many, many human sacrifices. This is from his book Magic. Okay, it said, quote, for the highest spiritual working, one must accordingly choose that victim which contains the greatest and purest force. A male child of perfect innocence and high intelligence is the most satisfactory and suitable victim. We'll stop right there for a second. What did he just say? A male child? Yes, he sacrificed young boys, and often. He continues and says, those magicians who object to the use of blood have endeavored to replace it with incense, but the bloody sacrifice, though more dangerous, is the more efficacious. And for nearly all purposes, human sacrifice is the best. In the sacrifice during evocation, however, it may be said, without fear of contradiction, that the death of the victim should coincide with the supreme evocation. Now, I know this is a little vulgar, but I want you guys to understand how wicked this man was. We need to understand that supreme evocation, what does that mean? In chapter 15 of his book, I went and looked up some keywords about the supreme evocation to flip through his book and find out what he was talking about. Supreme evocation talks about the height of sexual orgasm. Now, I'll let you understand what he just meant by that. He said the death of the victim should coincide with the supreme evocation. He was a pedophile and a murderer, murdering young boys like this. It's also labeled as a footnote in his book Magic from some of the authors who put this together. It says, quote, "It appears from the magical records that he made this particular sacrifice," that is a male child with high intelligence and the supreme evocation I just talked about. It says, quote, "He made this particular sacrifice on an average of about 150 times every year between 1912 and 1928, end quote. So you got to understand, this guy, and this stuff about sacrificing people like this still goes on in Satanism. It's very hidden right now. They don't come out in public and do all this stuff, obviously, because they don't want to put a bad name on Satanism. But there are covens of Satanists that do make human sacrifices even today. I mean, some people think the missing persons cases that go on, this isn't just random people going around and kidnapping people willy-nilly for no reason. Many of the missing persons cases that are in this country today have come from Satanist groups that will go and pick somebody up and bring them down to their secret areas to do human sacrifices on them. And I have read and heard about people who have come out of Satanism, who've actually gotten saved and come out of Satanism, who were involved in some of that stuff. We've actually listened to some of the, in past Bible studies, about a year ago, I think, if some of you who were with us then remember that we listened to some of those testimonies. But continuing on here, Aleister Crowley, he died in 1947. I just say, praise God, he's dead. I'm sorry to say it that way, but this guy was so wicked. I'm just glad he's not on the earth anymore. But he had a poem called Hymn to Pan. Now, Pan is a demonic god that he worshipped. Pan is in the form of what they call a faun. A faun is a half human, half goat. It has, like, the bottom half of them are a goat. They have goat legs. And it's called a faun. Like they have the horns of a goat, but the top half of them is like human. In fact, a lot of those demonic creatures are portrayed in things like the Chronicles of Narnia from C.S. Lewis. But again, we'll talk about that later when we get to the fantasy novel stuff. But in his book Magic, he said, quote, in his Hymn to Pan, it says, "Goat of thy flock, I am gold, I am God, flesh to thy bone, flower to thy rod, with hooves of steel I race on the rocks, though solstice stubborn to equinox, and I rave, and I rape, and I rip, and I rend everlasting, world without end," end quote. Well, that sounds really wholesome, doesn't it? Definitely something you want the whole family to hear. Crowley was... You know, when you think about Crowley, you got to think, wow, this guy had to have been shunned, and he has to be considered an example of pure wickedness by the world. In fact, that is not even close to the truth. In fact, the opposite is true, because I checked out the BBC press office on the 100 top greatest Britons who ever lived. Aleister Crowley is named number 73 in the top 100 greatest Britons who ever lived. That wasn't based on a committee. It was based on a television popularity poll. I want you to understand. You see, in Britain, though, you have to understand, witchcraft is much more open and prevalent over there than it is here. Now, granted, witchcraft is one of the fastest growing religious cults in the United States today. It's fast growing, but over in the UK, they have a lot more over there than they do here. But the bottom line is, now that you have an idea of Aleister Crowley, most Christians have no idea that the core foundation of rock music has come from the inspiration of this man I just described to you. This satanic, homosexual, pedophilic, psychotic killer that was bathed in witchcraft. This is the man that the rock music that's been developed in the past 50 years, this man inspired where all this is coming from. And I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Now, I've got a picture on the website of some etchings into a vinyl album. This is the album of a band called Led Zeppelin. I'm sure everybody here has heard of Led Zeppelin at one point in time or another. And Led Zeppelin, into their vinyl album they released for their Stairway to Heaven, which is one of the most, probably, I would say, the most popular song in all of rock music, Stairway to Heaven. And in that vinyl album, they etched in the words, "Do what thou wilt, and so mote be it." Two direct quotations from Aleister Crowley's religious cult from his book Magic. They did study at the feet of Aleister Crowley. Okay? In 1971, Jimmy Page, who's the lead guitarist for Led Zeppelin, purchased Aleister Crowley's house. It's called the Boleskine Lodge on the shore of Loch Ness Lake. Hey guys, if you've seen, you guys know what Loch Ness Lake is. If you've seen my seminar I did on dinosaurs in the Bible, we talk about the Loch Ness Monster, about that being a plesiosaur and the sightings of that, and how there's actually been sightings of creatures like the Loch Ness Monster all around the world. Places like Japan and Nova Scotia, they found all sorts of sightings of this, so it's not just Lake Loch Ness. But Lake Loch Ness has, Aleister Crowley had a house there, and Jimmy Page bought this house. Later the same year after he bought the house, Led Zeppelin released Stairway to Heaven. It was, I mean, we're talking the highest rated, most profitable of rock songs of all time. And on the vinyl album, they etched these words for their quotations from Crowley's book Magic. Robert Plant, who's a lead singer for Led Zeppelin, he gave his testimony about them writing Stairway to Heaven. Now listen to this. Quote, "I was holding a pencil and paper, and for some reason I was in a very bad mood. Then all of a sudden my hand was writing out the words. There's a lady who's sure all that glitters is gold, and she's buying a stairway to heaven. I just sat there and looked at them and almost leapt out of my seat." End quote. What this is called is demonic channeling. This is where a demon who has possessed you starts writing out things without you're not even almost conscious. The demon takes over and starts writing things down. Okay? And so what did they do? I mean, he almost leapt out of his seat, but then they're like, oh wow, this is amazing. So what did they do? They continued to work on the song. The beginnings of the writing of that song was demonic channeling, and then they added in a bunch of words on their own. Some of the words they added in on their own. And how many are any of you in here familiar with the song Stairway to Heaven?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I knew I wasn't alone because I mean.
Me too.
Yeah. And when I was younger, I used to listen to this all the time. I liked this song. I thought it was really great. But if you're familiar with it, there's a lyric that if you guys that are familiar with it, it says, quote, "It's just a spring clean for the May Queen," end quote. This is in reference to Aleister Crowley's poem called May Queen. A lot of people don't know that. All the lyrics that they started adding into this, I mean, there's a lot of references to Aleister Crowley in that. Not just are there references to Aleister Crowley, but also there's something. Now, I want to make mention of what this is. It's you guys have heard of this before, I'm sure, where you play things backwards. And when you play a song backwards, there's hidden messages in there. People call that commonly backmasking, but you need to understand, what I'm going to read to you here is not backmasking. Okay? Backmasking is when you make a song and then in the recording studio, you purposely put in certain sounds or certain words or things like that, and the recording studio implements it so that way when you play it backwards, you'll hear a different message when you play it backwards. But this is not what this is. What happened with Led Zeppelin and their song Stairway to Heaven, these words that I'm going to read to you came out without any recording studio intervention. This is purely demonic messages, okay? If there's the forward lyrics, this section, it says, "If there's a bustle in your hedgerow, don't be alarmed now, it's just spring clean for the May Queen." It says, "Yes, there are two paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on." Okay? That's what it says. The backwards lyrics, when you play this backwards, it says, "Oh, here's to my sweet Satan, the one whose little path would make me sad, whose power is Satan. He will give those with him 666. There was a little tool shed where he made us suffer, sad Satan." That's what it says backwards. And you can make out all these words when it's saying this. You have to understand, this song has to be so incredibly demonically possessed. The people writing it had to be so demonically possessed, because there's no way that a human being would have the mental capacity to be able to make a message forward and backward without any of studio recording equipment or pre-planning. I mean, this is not just some coincidence. This is a satanically planted message in this song. Now, keep in mind, there's a lot of people, and I think we'll probably end up discussing this later. Actually, no way, I am getting ahead of myself. We are going to discuss this in a moment, so I won't say that. We'll get to it. There's hidden messages in a lot of things. It's not just in music, but in television shows. There's all sorts of these strange messages that people have put into things. For example, Dora the Explorer. Actually, I think I'll go ahead and just play the audio for you here. I'll see if I can play this. And you guys listen to this and tell me what you think. Backwards. Did you guys just hear them say "Hail Satan"?
Yeah, I heard it. My niece and nephew watched them.
Yeah.
Watches Dora.
So here's the thing about that. I mean, first of all, we have to stop and say, is that a complete coincidence that that's in there? I mean, this stuff is appearing in a lot of things, and there's a number of children's television shows this has been tested on, and there's all sorts of things in children's songs on different television shows like this that have demonic messages in them. So as a Christian, we have to be careful with everything you will see and hear when you research a topic like this, because there's a lot of stuff out there that are going to have like some hoaxes or exaggerations. Some things where, somebody will say, oh, here's what this actually said, and when you play in reverse and you listen to it, you're like, I don't hear that at all. There's nothing, like, you can't even make anything out like that. So there's some people that make this stuff up. But even just because there's some Christians that have gone way over the top on this stuff does not mean there are not actually real subliminal messages in these and reversed subliminal messages in this stuff. So I use Dora the Explorer as an example because that message is very clear. You can hear it clear as day. Now, I want to read this quote from, it's a book called Consumer Behavior in Action, Real-Life Applications for Marketing Managers. It discusses this issue. It says, quote, one theory underlying backward masking is that selective cognitive processes ordinarily screen out unwanted information. However, when data enters our brain backward, it is not filtered, and somehow the subconscious can translate it to become meaningful. Supposedly, when we hear these songs forward, the brain picks up the backward message subliminally. Consequently, they can affect one's mind, actions, and personality, end quote. Now, the author goes on to say that reverse subliminal messaging is not true. However, he gives no studies whatsoever or any references that say that it isn't. Because, stopping and think, subliminal messages have been shown clinically to affect people. But a reverse hidden message in there. Number one, I think we're underestimating how powerful the brain is as a tool that God created. The brain is an incredibly powerful tool. Just where I tell people all the time, the most powerful supercomputer in the world today, if you walk into a room and take 5 seconds, scan your eyes across the room and take everything in, it's enough to keep the most powerful supercomputer in the world busy for the next 100 years analyzing that information. Your brain is incredibly powerful. And being able to decode certain information, even if you're unaware that that's what you're doing, the brain does a lot of stuff like that. That's how I talk about brainwashing. If you guys ever saw, I did a little podcast video a long time ago on brainwashing. But a lot of times I've gone to, I've talked to people about the brainwashing thing. I've done examples when I've gone to churches and showed how easy it was to get brainwashed. But I said basically all they have to do to brainwash you is simply leave out key pieces of information in what they're telling you, and your brain will fill in the blanks automatically, even though you don't even realize that's what you're doing. That's what brainwashing is. So basically, you almost brainwash yourself when it comes down to it, without it's to not stepping back and looking at it and acknowledging the truth of the situation, and asking the questions right. Is this really what this person said, or is this really what this is supposed to be? Blah, blah, blah. I know it's kind of vague, but I don't want to get too far into it right now. But they give no references. How could you possibly do a test on reverse subliminal messages? Because in that, you'd have to stop and consider, you would have to do, all they could do is short-term experiments, number one. Then you couldn't actually prove that the experiments that they were doing caused the effect, and it wasn't something else. Then you couldn't prove it or disprove it. You also couldn't prove or disprove any long-term effects. I mean, I don't know and I have to pray the Lord would protect me and cleanse me from any unrighteous things that I put in my brain, because when I've listened to this music, my gosh, guys, when I was researching this, I mean, I realized how much I needed the Lord's protection over this, because I hated writing this article. Hated it. Because for days, I had a bunch of this rock music stuck in my head. because I was looking up lyrics, and just reading the lyrics, I can hear the song in my head. The sad part about this is I've had that Stairway to Heaven playing in my brain just from reading some of the lyrics since I just read it a few minutes ago. I mean, I just now realized it as I was saying this. Guys, you don't know what that subliminal messaging is doing to you long term. We don't know how that affects people 5, 10, 20 years down the road. We don't know. And so when you listen to that stuff, even if you have it on a radio station, I mean, I hate having to hear some of this music going on just when I'm working in a store. I don't like to hear it. But continuing, the Beatles did some, there's backmasking that's designed and backmasking that's not designed. The not designed is what you'll hear in Dora the Explorer, or you'll hear in like Stairway to Heaven. But the Beatles did a lot of on-purpose backmasking that was done in the recording studio. Like they did an album called Magic Circle, where if you play it backwards, it says "Turn Me On, Dead Man," and it just repeats that over and over. They actually put that stuff in there. But and even there's some popular Christian rock bands that have done it. Five Iron Frenzy did some of that. They did a song called "The Untimely Death of Brad," and if you play it backwards, there's a phrase that they inserted in there that says, "Brad is dead, let's kill Brad." Why would any Christian artist do that? And I got to tell you, Five Iron Frenzy was my #1 favorite Christian rock band ever. I loved Five Iron Frenzy more than anything, and that was more than any other music, is what I was trying to say. But I don't listen to their stuff anymore because so much of it is unbiblical. And we'll talk more about them later. I'll bring up some of them. Because when I was analyzing the subject, I wasn't just being biased against music I didn't listen to. I went back and researched the music I did like, that I did used to listen to all the time. So it's not like, I'm sitting here in some hypocritical fashion judging everybody else's music. No, I went first to judge what I listened to and wanted to see if it was righteous by God. But anyway, the practice of backward speech was an occultic technique that was taught and developed by Aleister Crowley. That'll blow your mind when you start thinking about this stuff and realizing how many connections there are to this. Aleister Crowley said that one could obtain magical memory by learning to speak things backwards and to communicate with the spirit world. That communication with the spirit world could be established through reversed speech. He would memorize all sorts of things backwards. And so if you wonder why in some of this satanically inspired music you're hearing this stuff, these satanic messages backwards, that's because part of this, the Aleister Crowley and Satanism developed this. And obviously he learned this from Satan. It wasn't that this magical memory that he had that, it's like I was just experimenting with doing things backwards and I liked it so I kept it. No, when he did that, he actually got real effects from doing these things backwards. And of course, everything that Satan does is the complete reverse opposite of what the Bible says. So it's no wonder that saying things in reverse, that's exactly what Satan wants to do. So you take, for example, I looked up some music on this. The Jonas Brothers, which is, totally wicked Jonas Brothers. Basically, anything that Disney promotes is wicked. And I have to, be as hard on myself as anybody else out there because Disney owns so much more than you think. You'd be surprised if you knew all the things that Disney actually owns. And I'm going to say that 99% of Americans have something Disney in their house, even if they don't know it. Unless you're Amish, you probably got something Disney in your house, and you probably don't even know it. So anyway, continue. The Jonas Brothers, they have a song called Kids of the Future. When you play it reversed, it says, "I speak for Satan, 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 our sweet forsaken Satan, Satan." You can hear it. Some of these, I'm naming these off. I'm not going to play them for you. You can go look these up on places like YouTube and things like that. People have examples of these. Gwen Stefani, "It's My Life." That's the song that she has. Reversed, it says, quote, "I love Satan," end quote. The TV theme of Saved by the Bell. I remember that being on a bunch when I was really little. That TV theme, when you play it reverse, you'll hear, quote, "Man, I miss my Satan, we're all saved," end quote. So, and one of the really creepy ones I saw was a Jay-Z Grey album interlude that he had. And this one I actually caught into because there was a guy playing this for his church, showing them what because I think it was mostly an African American church, and so a lot of them, he was getting up, and I really have to commend this preacher. He was getting up and really condemning a lot of the rap music they were listening to, and so he was showing this example from Jay-Z. When you play it in reverse, it says, quote, "Murder, murder, Jesus 666," end quote. Now that's not backmasking, folks. I mean, this is satanic messages that are just come out of the song when you play it backwards. In fact, this is what I found out. If you could actually get a recording of Barack Obama, you guys know his "Yes We Can," his campaign slogan? Listen to this. I'm going to play this for you. I want you guys... Oh, I can't... sorry, I got a bad video on here, so I don't think I can play it right now. I can't find it right. I'll have to see if I can find a better video for that. Somebody took it off of YouTube. But, you can hear the audience.
Wait, they did?
Well, no, this one video I had linked to. I'll have to find another one that might do it, that might have it.
Oh.
But you'll hear this video, and they're chanting, the crowd's chanting, "Yes, we can, yes, we can." But if you play it backwards, you'll hear them chanting, "Thank you, Satan." Clear as day. I played this for some friends of ours a couple weeks ago when they visited us, and they were just, he was shocked. It was like, I can't believe that you can hear him saying it like that. So that's why I tell people we have to be careful what we speak. And there's a bunch of Christians, I guarantee, out there who supported Barack Obama and chanted that "Yes, we can," but backwards it's really thanking Satan. I mean, it's not really that surprising to hear, that that's coming out of Barack Obama, but that's not something that I think Barack Obama planned, or that his staff planned when they came up with this phrase "Yes, we can." But I bet it's something Satan planned. So we need to be careful about that. So these kind of strange demonic messages are so common in rock songs in the past 50 years. But they're not just found in reverse. A lot of times you will hear references to Crowley, Satanism, hell, the devil. They're all found in the forward lyrics. These people just come out and say this stuff. And we're going to get into some examples of those starting next week. I think we're going to stop here for now. And but next week we're going to get into examples of bands that have just come out, and they automatically talk about Aleister Crowley and their stuff. They studied at his feet, basically. And what we'll find out is that Aleister Crowley, and the interesting thing, I don't know if I put this in the article or not, but the interesting thing about it was that when I was studying some of that, there's a quotation directly from his book that says about his book, all of his writings, his tarot cards, all that stuff. He tells people, if you find this stuff, my writings, my tarot cards, all things like that, he tells people to burn them. Do not study them, to burn them. But, of course, nobody listens, and he does it anyway. These people start studying this stuff anyway. Even he warned people not to get involved in what he was doing, but they've done so. And the rock music genre today is what we've gotten as a result of that. So anyway, we'll stop there, and we'll pick up on that next week again. Did anybody have any comments or questions, something you guys want to discuss before we close out here?
Chris, I'll just say that over the last 3 months or so, I've especially studied this issue before I even came across your website, because I was listening to one of my favorite worship groups and noticed, both my husband and I noticed, there was like satanic symbology in a video that had come out recently, a worship video, and it startled us so much that we really started researching it. And I mean, I found articles and YouTube, radio broadcasts showing like artists like Michael W. Smith, some of the very clear satanic symbology on his cover videos from the beginning all the way through, and the translations of those, kind of like how you talk to a witch. The person researching him spoke with someone who's immersed in paganism ideology, like someone who was a doctor on it, and translated what the pagan symbology on his covers meant. Him, many others. I mean, it's just so rampant. My husband and I went through our music. We were getting rid of things because once you see it and are aware, I mean, how can you look at it the same? And the worship group that I have loved, I mean, Australia, and their music goes all over the world. And I don't want to say that, I'm not trying to say that all of the singers and all of the songs are evil, but this one video had an enormous triangle in the back of it, and it appeared like there were demonic creatures coming out of it. And we just couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just my 2 cents on it. I literally, like, it's so hard to know what to trust anymore. I personally have been, like, trying to YouTube worship songs that are hymns more. Like, I don't want to say that it's all bad, but it's like, okay, what can I trust? I have to start there.
Well, isn't it better to be safe than sorry on a lot of that? I mean, and that's why it's not so much that you're... I mean, I understand, because you're like, well, I just want to stick with the hymns. Well, at least most of the hymns that are in our hymnal books are excellent. You can match those up with the book of Psalms, and you can see a lot of similarities. In fact, there's many of the hymns that have basic phrases taken straight out of the King James Bible. So, I mean, what you're really singing is the King James Bible, which is nice. But with a lot of this music, I mean, so much of it, you almost have to research the songs that you're listening to before you feel safe to even listen to them. But again, that's just us trying to make sure that we are exercising discernment on what's happening. We have to continually pray that God would continue to give us that discernment so that we can understand it. And we're not, again, we don't choose our music so much based on what sounds good as much as we're choosing it based on what does God approve of. And there's I've had somebody ask me the other, they sent me an email. I never heard back from them because I know people are usually disappointed with that, because they said, what music would you say is safe to listen to? I can't give you that answer. Because if I give you that answer, what you're doing is you're building your convictions over what is and is not acceptable based on what I think, instead of getting convictions from the Holy Spirit. That's what I want people to do. So people that are actually, I'm not saying it's bad to ask me any questions, but really you should be able, once you study the Scripture, you should be able to have your own discernment about what is righteous and what isn't righteous. Now sometimes, asking me questions is I may have done some research that someone else may not have done, and vice versa. We're going to see some examples of that coming up here in a few weeks as we go through this. We'll see some examples of some of the modern music that's come out and the problems with them. And it's a whole lot more than just satanic symbols. There's tons of anti-biblical stuff in it. But once you really start studying the Word of God more, again, your discernment will start coming out more, and you'll start being able to see these things on your own. Just as when you listen to stuff, or you'll hear something and something about what you'll say, wait a second, that's not right. And as long as we keep to trying to understand the Word of God, and to acknowledge His truth, and to study to show ourselves approved unto God, rightly dividing the word of truth, okay, we will see these things come out of it. Only because if we get too wrapped up into the emotion of the music, I understand, maybe better than anybody, getting wrapped up in the emotion of music, okay? I know that might be, I know some people say, well, no, Chris, I understand it better than everybody. Okay, I'm sure everybody will claim that, but, me understanding myself, I probably understand that better than anybody, the emotion that you can get from music. I mean, I get down to, there is a certain chord change that I love so much, I'll repeat that little 10-second part over and over just because I love how it flows, and I learn things from that because I play guitar and all that. But when this person wrote me this thing, I said, you know what, anymore, and my wife can be a testimony to this, she can tell you, I really don't listen to songs with words in them hardly ever. If I listen to anything, it's an instrumental or an orchestrated version of something, and most of any worship music that I would listen to, I actually play on my guitar in my own time. So, I mean, and that's why, I guess, and I don't, some people are confused also, I guess maybe I better make mention of this, some people are confused that, well, they say, well, Chris, you say this is like a church group that you have, but you don't have any praise music on there. Well, I would ask people to show me where in the Bible that praise music is a required prerequisite in order to have a church service. I mean, I don't know where that tradition got started, but I've not seen that in the Bible. Now, maybe there's a section. I'm willing to be corrected. If I am, and that's a correction I need to make, and that's something we need to correct here, then let me know, and I will make that correction. But I've never seen it. What I more want to do is not approach the Word of God in this emotional high state, because I see all the churches around here doing, all the modern churches do that. They're like, we got to have these big grand stages with a bunch of lights and all these instruments and big loud music and all these, the TV screens around it and everything like that. We have to make this big display so everybody's on an emotional high, and then we'll study the Word of God. No, the Bible says, come now, let us reason together, saith the Lord. He didn't say, come now, let us feel together. He said, let us reason together. And so I think we ought to keep our senses about us while we're doing that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being in worship to God, but as you'll see, many times the Hebrews did worship together, but a lot of the stuff that David wrote and sang and things like that, he did in private. He did on his own. Between him and God, and he wasn't making, like today, a lot of people, they're making a show. They're just putting on a show for the masses, and I thought, you know what, I just don't want to put on a show for everybody. I mean, I could, if I wanted to, get out my guitar and we could sing songs and play stuff right here, but I'm not here making it look a show. I want us to study and revere the Word of God above all things. And to be honest, there is so much information to cover, we really don't have time for the music in this. Just a short 2-hour thing. So that's kind of why we don't do that here. And so, anyway, we're going to learn more about that as we go on. Did anybody else have any comments or questions before we close?
Where did you hear that Alistair Crowley wanted people to burn his stuff?
That was in his book.
I've never heard of it.
That was in his book. I read about it. I just didn't include it in the article because it really wasn't relevant to the point I was trying to make. But that was in his book. And there was another quotation I read from another book from him about his tarot cards as well. So if someone finds that incorrect, I'll correct myself on it. But after what I've learned about Aleister Crowley, I really don't want to learn too many more details about him. I really don't want to know. Again, the Bible says, "Be simple concerning evil." But I did read quotations from him that he said to burn his stuff. So there are, like I said, there's other witches I've heard of who've gone to other of their friends, and they say, if I ever die, I've got a little black box under my bed. Burn it. Don't open it, just burn it. Okay, they know, a lot of these people know the dark magic that they are into and the amount of demons and spirits that they're involved with in that. So Aleister Crowley, just because he was into this stuff doesn't mean he wasn't aware of what he was doing. Someone that wicked is probably fully aware that he's letting demons possess him, and he does it willingly. So him writing that doesn't surprise me that he would. All right, and we will see you guys next week. Thanks for stopping by.